Behind the net, centers, flat, tries to Clark, shot, oh, rebound, scores! Clark scores the game winner at 12 minutes and 1 second of Sunday's overtime.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.
And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 189, brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com. And you are about to hear a Flyers draft preview. We have two wonderful draft pundits, guys that have been around the block a little bit. You're going to get some really good info here. We're real excited. The Flyers are picking at number 7, number 22. As things stand right now, that could change. It's 9 days, things could happen. The draft is on Wednesday, June 28th, and Thursday, June 29th, wrapping up from there. So we're going to get rolling. Let's introduce the panel. Just a word that Chef had a little bit of a dental emergency. He may be joining us later, or maybe not. But with me tonight is the great Dan Silver. Dan, how are you, man?
I'm great. We got a week to go till the draft. It's a great time of the year.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent here. It's going to be busy. It's probably the busiest time for the league, really. I mean, you got the Cup, you got the draft, and then the NHL free agency and all kinds of things. And we're also in the buyout period right now, too. So before we get our special guest going tonight, just to remind you that the O&B Puckcast is on 12 podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon, Audible, Google. Of course, we have a YouTube channel. Just plug in there, O&B Puckcast. And, of course, we have a Facebook page. And if you could, on your podcast platform of choice, if you could follow, subscribe, whatever applies, it really, really would be appreciated because it moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And we do appreciate that. We had a record-setting show last time out, and we do appreciate that. And without any further ado, let's bring on these wonderful guests. First, we're going to introduce from Hockey Prospect Radio and also SiriusXM Radio. He's our old buddy, Shane Malloy. How are you, man?
Gentlemen, how are you? I'm happy to be here. Thankfully, the draft is right around the corner. It's the funnest time of the year for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, our old buddy, one of our original recurring guests, he's on Locked On Flyers podcast, Off the Post Radio, Sportsology.com. And of course, he's just ubiquitous in the hockey world. His name is Russ Cohen.
Hey, Isaiah. How are you? Dan, Shane, nice to see you all.
Yep.
Good to be
so. Yeah, great. Great to have all you guys. Listen, tonight, what I want to do is we're not going to do so much of a mock draft. A lot can happen between now and the next 9 days. What we want to do is we want to compare how our pundits rank the players in this upcoming 2023 entry draft and compare notes a little bit. Then we'll get around the pick number 7, and we'll talk about some of the players the Flyers could be looking at. And also we'll take it down to 22 and maybe a little bit after that, time permitting. So, gents, Russ, let me start with you. We're at pick number 1. I don't think this one's that difficult.
No, it's Connor Bedard. I mean, he's really just tremendous. He does everything you want him to do. My biggest thing with Bedard is that he I'm not sure I've seen another prospect like this. He goes longer on shifts and is just as good at the beginning as the end as any player I've ever seen, maybe the best. And so it's like he almost doesn't tire out, and he does seem to go longer. It's hard to get that number because the CHL doesn't give you much stats. But from what I could see, yeah, he's just got amazing staying power besides everything else you see.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the most distinguishing thing that sets, I think, Bedard apart from his peer group is his deception. And in terms of his ability to force defenders to make moves and to go in a direction that they don't want to go. So if he's coming down on a defenseman, he'll wait them out and force to see where they put their stick, where their weight shifts, where their toe caps are. And once he sees that happen, then he's by you. He'll make a move, and then you're forced to pivot quickly or to try to cross over and catch him, but forget that that's not going to happen. So for me, it's really his deceptive ability and his counterattack ability. That's what really sets him apart from anybody else in this draft. The only one that's close to that is probably Michkov, but I think Bedard is still, a little class above everybody else.
So number 2 has been unanimous for many, but not completely so. Russ, where do you stand in number 2 for this particular draft?
Yeah, I still go with Adam Fantilli. In the end, his all-around game is really unmatched in this draft class. He's got size, he's got speed, he can go finesse, he can go physical. He can have these lightning strikes to the net that you just can't hold him back. Like the minute he sees an opportunity, he goes for it. He's got a terrific shot. He is super smart too. Like this is a smart guy, a young guy who came in as a true freshman and dominated college hockey. It doesn't happen often.
I have Fantilli as well. It was really tight between him and Carlson, particularly because I weight centers with more value than wingers. So that's part of the equation from that standpoint. Fantilli plays with his hair on fire. So he's full on every shift. And occasionally he's the type of player who will skate himself into a little bit of trouble because he skates so quickly into situations, but he can take advantage of players and defenders because of that speed and that size combination. Where you look at, his counterpart in Lucas Carlson, we'll talk about, has some differences in his game. And it was just Fantilli's willingness and desire to be the man. He wants the puck all the time. Like when things are bad, and he's very hard on sometimes on his teammates in terms of just getting focused and get your game together. Like we're here to win. Like he's very serious in that respect, but he's jovial and great in interviews. But when a game's on the line, he's pretty intense.
Dan?
So I just wanted to, and we're going to talk about the player I'm going to mention here, I'm sure a lot in a little bit, but I just was curious. We're talking about the, top rankings and Bedard and both you guys have Fantilli second. So a question I had was, and we'll talk about kind of what has resulted in Matvei Michkov kind of falling down on some rankings, and also, a lot of uncertainty around him with his contract, what happened with his father, a lot of different stuff. But we had Steve Kornianos on a few weeks ago, and he made an interesting point. With Russians, geopolitical situation right now, we really haven't gotten to see a lot of these Russian players playing against their peers in like the World Juniors or whatnot. He made the point that if you go back to the 2021 U8 teams, that Michkov was far and away the most electric player in that tournament, that he was actually outperforming Bedard. Michkov had 12 goals in 7 games. And that's the last time that we've really gotten to see those two players sort of on the same sheet of ice and in the same competitive environment. Is there a chance that because, Michkov has been playing in the KHL against professionals, arguably the second best league in the world, is there a chance that he ends up being a more talented offensive contributor eventually than Bedard?
Well, that would really depend on the environment he's in. Environment changes everything. What team, what organization you're in, and what your line mates are, and what system you're playing, and how much the coach trusts you. So is it possible that he could match him in points? It's probable. I would not. You can't say that zero, but you certainly could make an argument for 30%, 40% chance of that happening, matching Bedard because of his. And one of the things that sometimes we forget is how talented the under 18, under 20 teams are for Russia. They're very good teams. So he's playing with a very strong team itself. Honestly, the margins between Bedard to Fantilli to Carlson and Michkov are very thin. And the only reason why I have Michkov one slot below Carlson and Fantilli is really just simply positional value of centerman over a winger and don't get me wrong, you can marvel at Michkov in that respect. So I think sometimes we can get caught in saying, oh, he's 4, so he's not as good. I mean, the margins I think are really slim. So if he's in the right spot, in the right place, I wouldn't be shocked that he puts up 80, 90 points a year and scores 40 goals, maybe 50. He has that ability. He's a special player in terms of that. So it's unfortunate we haven't got to see him play against his peer group in the last year. I think that would have really helped just alleviate some concerns with certain people. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a risk to take him at 4. I don't think it's a risk to take him at 3. If you choose to do so in that respect, I'm not concerned about the geopolitical issues in that respect. He's an 8-year-old kid. He can't control that. And so from that standpoint, and I'm not worried about the contract. This is Russia. If you want to get a player out, you can get him out. It's called the Great Green Convincer. You can throw enough money at a team to get him out of there if you really want to. So that to me is not a concern.
Russ?
Yeah, I mean, no spoiler alert. I had Carlson in the same spot. Having to get to talk to Carlson at the Stanley Cup, and luckily I was like the first question. I really like to sort of get into a guy's psyche, so I literally asked him, what position do you play? And he goes, I am a center. And he just sort of gave me this stare. And I was like, okay, you convinced me, kid. I mean, I pretty much thought you were a center too, but I want to ask you. And he didn't stammer. And he explained why he's a center. And so, like Shane said, if he's a center, this guy, the way he gets to the net through traffic, the way he plays defense, and he's got an all-around game too. He's got also a frame that is going to be able to put on some muscle. With Michkov, it's everything that Shane said is true. And now the other thing that's coming into play here is we're hearing this stuff coming out of Russia, like, hey, he might talk to some teams before the draft, might. And he also might show more interest in some teams than others, might. And so when you start hearing that is enough to scare away some teams. And I think that's what, his representations wanting to have happen is to have some of these teams that are really like fringe teams to stay away from him. So like, let's just say, argument's sake, he goes 8th to the Capitals. Well, geez, if he plays next to Ovechkin, he is going to have 90 points and 40 goals pretty soon. So, yeah, I mean, he's a tremendous talent. And now they're sort of playing this mental game because he hasn't spoken to anybody. Nobody has, seen him other than on video for the last year. That's the unknown about this. Otherwise, like Shane said, he'd be gone very, very early. But now he could drop a few spots.
Shane, Carlson, Michkov. I mean, we've already mentioned Michkov, so maybe a little bit on Carlson.
Well, I mean, Russ made some really good points about Michkov, about Carlson's game. And what intrigues me about him is his 5-on-5 play, his ability to produce offense 5-on-5. But it appears that he's going to have some matchup ability as well, which makes him valuable in the playoffs. I think sometimes as a collective group, us who watch the regular season and we go, okay, the game is played a certain way. And then the first round of the playoffs hits. And then we go, oh, so that's how we have to play in the playoffs. And that's how you have to win in the playoffs. And there's a big, heavy body with the skill set who can play in the middle of the ice, that can control the middle of the ice. That's a guy that you're going to want in the playoffs. So there's some advantages to Carlson's game in that respect. So, I mean, I think both Russ and I have the same players going 1 through 4. So there's not much debate in that respect, but certainly I think I'm sure our list diverge a little bit once we get out of 5.
Yeah. And have you noticed in general that this is that kind of draft? The disparity is so great once you get after those first 4 or 5. And Russ, at number 5, I think you have what a lot of Philadelphia fans are hoping will be a player that could be available to them. Tell us about him.
Yeah, Zach Benson. Zach Benson's tremendous. He may be 5'10". He may be, 173 pounds today. He's going to gain more, but he's the smartest player in the draft. He's like a coach on the ice. His starting and stopping ability to kind of get past the defense and fool the defense is really good. He's also a shot deception guy where he practices that all the time, different angles, all of that. He can play make as well, and he knows how to make mini donuts. Now, if you tell everybody in South Philly that his family, owns like this traveling carnival and he was the mini donut guy for like years, that's going to put him over the top. I don't care. But as far as Benson goes, I'm not worried about his height. Now, you have to say you are worried about other players like, and I don't know if he'll play at center. He's got all the attributes. He's good on faceoffs, but maybe that's the dividing line. When he gets to the NHL, he can't play center, but I think he's going to play at the NHL level.
That's where I have Will Smith at number 5. And this is really, we talked about it prior to starting the show with Dan, made some interesting observations about that balance between the ceiling of a player and a floor. Mm-hmm. And I'm really pushing, obviously, in this respect, is Will Smith is a centerman. He's going to be driving a top line at Boston College, mm-hmm. and he has all this upside. Are there things in his game that I certainly think are going to have to improve? Yes, but he's going to have that time. That's the one advantage of college players, is that if he can stay in college for an extra couple of years, like 2 years. Don't come out after your freshman year, because I just don't think he's going to be ready to be thrown into the wolves in the NHL. But his offensive upside is so high in terms of his playmaking ability. He's going to be a menace in that respect. So that's why I bet on the upside ceiling for Will Smith at 5.
Gotcha. Dan?
Yeah, no, Will Smith's an interesting one because, and I was actually listening to Shane on the show, and they were talking about Will Smith, and I have some of this. It seems like the momentum is that he's going to probably get picked in the top 4. Although I guess you never really know, right, what teams are putting out there or whatnot. But he's been a guy who I've sort of been out there saying that he'd be one of my least favorite guys for the Flyers to take, because Shane was talking about some of the drawbacks to his game at this point. And I think maybe what some people might be talking about, or people have been questioning his commitment to the defensive side of things, and look at the fact that he's got Ryan Leonard, who's a play driving winger on one wing, and Perreault, who's also, I think, a pretty good play driver, and think, okay, Will Smith really hasn't had to do a whole lot of puck retrieval work. And he's not that physical a player. And what's going to happen when we get to the NHL playoffs? Is he the kind of guy that's going to disappear? These are some of the concerns I have. But it is interesting. Before the show, I was kind of talking about you've got to look at the player's upside. And if he can improve those facets of his game, especially putting him on a Flyers type of team that's been drafting a lot of, I'd say, shoot first type of players, like a Tyson Forrester and a Cutter Gauthier, he could be the perfect kind of fit for those types of players if he really fits. I just have those concerns about his defensive commitment, which makes me think that he has the highest bust potential in the top 10, but he does really have that high upside, which I think is maybe why we'll see him go before the Flyers get taken. But it is interesting, because I have been hard on Will Smith in some of my evaluations, but maybe looking at the upside there, I should be looking at him a little bit differently.
Yeah, here's what I would say. I have him at 6, ranked 6th. That's jostled around during the year. Early in the year, I had Leonard higher. The thing about Smith is, and I saw him 5 or 6 times live, there were at least 3 or 4 games where I'm like, sometimes I'm not seeing it from Smith. I mean, he's skating well. They're getting chances, but he's not like a game breaker. And then all of a sudden the game breaking happens. And it's sometimes not just 1 point, it's 2 points. And it's him doing it. And then I saw that like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, you know what? He just may be that player, because we've seen Artemi Panarin do things like that. There are players in the NHL where that happens, where they're just like, I'm going to try this. All right, this doesn't work. I'm going to try that. That doesn't work. I'm going to try this. And he will constantly be at it, and he will wear defenses down. And that's what I've learned about Will Smith. I am not worried about him busting. The only thing I was saying was, and yes, Will Smith is more of a guaranteed center than Benson, but I think Benson could still play center. But the thing is, do I like Benson's IQ better or his overall game? Yeah, that's probably better. But I will tell you this, go back and watch the All-American Prospect game. Will Smith heard those things about his defense, and he played a lot of defense in that game on purpose with like 100 scouts there because he heard it.
That's one of the things about you're looking at high-end players like this, and it comes back to the quote back, from Bill Torrey when he drafted Mike Bossy. I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll teach him to play defense. And so Will Smith only has to be average.
Right.
Average. Because if he's that high level of playmaking center, he just has to be average defensively. You'll get other line mates that will, and the defenseman will make up for him. Because as Russ said, he's the guy who has that ability that maybe two players on your team have, that game-breaking ability. So you kind of like forgive the other things, because we're always searching for the ultimate all-round player, and it's such a unicorn that sometimes we forget like how valuable these guys are in that respect. So that's what sort of makes it interesting.
Real quick, Isaiah, before you move on with their rankings, since we are now getting to the point where we're getting close to where the Flyers pick, and obviously the spot where most folks listening to the show have a lot of interest, you guys are much more tied in than either Isaiah or I am with actual teams and front offices. Do you think that Will Smith is probably going to go top 5 or 6 and not be there by the time the Flyers select?
Yeah, he's gone.
I'd be surprised if he dropped to 7.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised. So I don't think he's necessarily going to be there. Look, we've seen it happen before. The Arizona Coyotes took Barrett Hayton at 5th overall and shocked the whole draft and totally messed up all of our lists. It's our personal list, not a mock draft. They destroyed the mock draft, so forget about that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I don't – that would be my guess, Dan, is that he's not going to be there. And, for at number 6 is where I have a player that I think the Philadelphia Flyers fans would covet, and that's Ryan Leonard. And, many of the reasons why, Dan, you had mentioned about him is it's his compete. Like, he has a combination of compete and hockey sense, and it's a difference between choices and decisions. Now, Will Smith makes great decisions with the puck. He knows where to move it. He knows when to shoot, when to pass, offensive zone, makes really smart decisions. But Leonard makes great choices. So he's a guy who's willing to take a hit to make a play. He's willing to go in the corner and battle for a puck and know he's going to get hurt. He's a guy who's willing to go in front of the net and try to tip shots that are some howitzers coming from the point. Like, he makes choices that are going to be self-sacrificing for the greater good. He's one of those guys that if you're looking at regular season players and playoff players, I have Leonard as a playoff player. It's one of the reasons why I have him at 6, even though he's a winger. And there are other centers that are, talented, Benson and Moore and, Dvorsky. But, at the end of the day, I think we're just all reminded about how hard it is to win in the playoffs. And I think Leonard adds a little bit of that, Philadelphia Flyers, old school. We're going to come in and we're going to smack you in the mouth and we're going to pay the price and you're not going to like it. And that's the way we're going to play, especially down low around the net, because you got to defend your net. You got to score in the net. So Leonard's my guy at 6.
Yeah. it seems to be a big theme I've heard throughout the draft season is that they are starting to separate these players by, okay, well, he's going to get you a certain number of points and play a certain way in the regular season. And then, like you're saying, in the playoffs, if you're trying to look for another criteria or dividing line between, if you're on the, you're straddling the fence between some of these players, you're going to default to the guy that you think, like Leonard here, is going to, make some hay in the playoffs and be a difference maker, I would think.
Yeah, and he has some versatility because he can play in the middle too. Now the problem is he hasn't played in the middle for quite some time. He'll get shifts in, but now that he's going to BC with the other two, so it'll be the triplets there. You certainly don't think he's not going to be in the middle of the ice because Cutter's going to take one position and Smith is going to take the other, so he's going to be on the wing for probably 2 more years there. But that doesn't mean as a pro he won't be able to find his way into the middle of the ice when it's needed. So that versatility has value too for organizations.
Russ, I think we're up to number 7.
Well, Russ.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if Russ got to talk about his go into detail on Smith. Oh, I think he has it hit at 6, right?
I went into enough detail as far as the game breaking and stuff. So yeah, I had him at 6. I have Dvorsky 7. And look, I love Leonard. I had him higher at times. I don't disagree with anything Shane said. Like right now, you could shake up some of these guys, put them in a blender, and it's really we're just talking about margins. But I will probably mock things differently too. I already have done one mock, and Shane and I are going to do a live one on Sirius on Friday at 12:00 in case you want to tune in. So on XM91. But the point is, Dvorsky's a center. He's already got a pro body. He's got a terrific shot. There was a guy from AIK, a fan, who argued with me when I said I really like Dvorsky's defense. And he goes, his defense, he stinks. He goes, what row do you sit in? Like as if I'm at games over there. And I'm like, I don't sit in a row. I watch a lot of video. I've seen him in international play. I said, you should watch him in international play because he plays against his peer group and not guys that are like 3 to 6 years older. His defense is really good. He is a guy that I think like Flyers fans haven't seen enough of, so there's not a lot of talk about him. I think it's also historically, I probably was the first one to point this out, like the Flyers in the first round, European players, they almost don't draft. Like it's Provorov, Rupstov, and good luck naming another one. You have to go back a while. So in the first round, they'll do it in the second and third. They'll take bigger swings in their minds. But this would show me if the Flyers took him there that, hey, and I'm not suggesting they will, but I'm just saying it would show me that, hey, you know what? They are thinking about things differently. They do need center help. That's obvious. And this guy has a lot of showmanship to him and a lot of confidence. And he's been playing up in age, and he's going to continue to develop overseas. He can come over anytime. Like anytime they feel like having him come over when they feel he's ready. There's no real hold. There's no holding back like a CHL contract or anything. So CHL rights. So I like him there. I didn't like him. I don't like him because of his availability. I like what his game is and what it can be. And when you see him against his peer group, he's pretty dynamic.
At number 7, this is where I have Oliver Moore, and we talk about that balance between ceiling and floor. So Will Smith is the ceiling, and Oliver Moore is there because of his floor. And because I just think he has the ability, like when you watch him play in the program, he played on a line with inferior line mates comparative to Will Smith. And he had to drive that line. And he did a lot of the more heavy lifting in terms of having to go against the other team's top pairing, Matt doing a lot of the individual matchups defensively. And I think he's a player, thankfully, and he's a right-handed shot, but he's another guy who could play 2 years in college and come out and be I wouldn't rank him as a first-line center, but I would rank him as a really good number 2. That's where I think his prime years are, from 24 to 30. He's a really good two-way, point-producing number 2 centerman that you're going to want. Like, because he can play in a lot of different positions. You can move him around the lineup. He can play. He'll be able to do penalty kill. He'll be able to do power play. And you notice that through on his 5-on-5 play. I would say 90% of the time I don't watch a player's power play or penalty kill. I watch their 5-on-5 because their skill sets and and how they play will dictate and they will give you understanding of whether they're going to play that at a pro game or not. So that's why I have Moore at number 7. We talk about safe bets, and that's a safe bet.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I love both those players. It's illustrates now we're at the spot where the Flyers are going to pick. I mean, this draft is obviously it's very deep at the top, but I think it's really deep through 10, 11. I mean, the Flyers are going to get a very good player.
100%.
And Dvorsky is one of my favorite players in the draft. Like, I don't think he's the most talented player in the draft, but watching him play, you talk about Gary Cobb, who was an ex-Eagles player, and he had a show on WIP, a popular show. Years ago when I was growing up, he used to do this show, call in and say, who's the guy that has it and who's the guy that doesn't have it? And, you just define it as when you're watching these guys that come through in the clutch and show emotion, they just have it. And Dvorsky, whenever I watch him play, I'm like, this guy has it. Like he comes through in big moments. I mean, he didn't, his line mates were not that great in the U18s. I mean, they were fine, but
he was clutch.
He was unbelievable.
He was clutch.
He was creating so much offense. And as Russ said, he's been playing against older guys. He was dominant defensively too. He's got a great shot. And so he's a guy that's got a high floor, but I also think he's got a high ceiling, which I don't think he gets credit for enough with some of the things that I read about, because I watch him play and I think, man, he's very talented. He's also, and again, this may not be a big deal, but I think he's one of the younger players in the draft from when he was born, which might not, probably doesn't make a huge difference, but he's 6 months of development.
You get more runway. You have more runway.
Can make a difference. And so he's a guy that I would be very happy if the Flyers took. I also really like Oliver Moore because look at the speed he's got. I mean, I don't know if the offensive upside is there.
And that's the difference between the two is Dvorsky's foot speed. I think he's going to be fine in the NHL. I'm not worried about it, but it's the ability to create time and space for yourself and take away time and space when you're defending. I think he's going to be fine, but he's not going to be, a good skater. He'll be an above average skater, but all his other tools make up for that. Because look at Mark Stone. Is Mark Stone a good skater? Like a fast skater? No, but he's a really highly effective skater because he understands how to skate the game. And to Dan's point, I think that Dvorsky's intelligence allows him to understand how to skate the game effectively. And that's what you look at guys like Toffoli's the same way. He's not the most fleet of foot, but he knows how to skate the game. He's really highly effective. He gets where he needs to be because he's there before, the opposition is or the puck has to be there. So that's where I look at Dvorsky's game. Some people may be concerned about that, but I wouldn't be entirely concerned, which is why I still have him pretty high.
Is there a comparable for Dvorsky that in the league? I mean, I know you're not making any real commitment there, but
I don't give up. I'll leave that to Shane.
I don't really have one off the top of my head.
I was DMing with Bill Meltzer, who has said to me that someone said to him that Dvorsky was like a sort of a higher offensive ceiling version of Michael Handzus or something like that. Someone said something to me about Bo Horvat today, which I thought was kind of interesting. But
yeah, I mean, probably because of the skating.
Right.
Bo Horvat was not a particularly excellent skater.
No, he's got a better shot than Horvat, but some of the other stuff is there.
He was average, but Bo Horvat's turned into a good skater at the NHL level.
Yeah,
he's above average to good. So that's also that time frame in there. Oh, like if the Philadelphia Flyers took Dvorsky at 7, I'd be like, okay.
Same here.
Yeah, okay, I understand it. Like you can justify that pick at that spot based on what their needs are. I wouldn't have any issue with that.
I've got a question for Shane because it's something we were talking about before the show, and we're talking about Ryan Leonard. Shane made the point when we were talking that in his research, when you're looking at power forwards, that guys who have a playmaking profile as a power forward typically have more sustained success in the NHL than power forwards who are primarily shooters. And so I kind of wanted to bring that up in reference to Ryan Leonard, because to me, he's a guy that a lot of people kind of look at as a shooting, goal scoring power forward. But I also think that he's a guy that also has a lot of playmaking ability. And I thought maybe Shane could kind of talk about that power forward distinction he was making and in reference to a guy like a Ryan Leonard.
Certainly. I mean, one of the things is it's also the situation he's put in. So he's accepted the role to play on the wing, very much like Cutter Gauthier did. And he was on the program. He deferred to go to the wing because there were so many centermen. Just because you go to the wing and you have he understands, who am I playing with? I'm playing with Will Smith. What is Will Smith's best attribute? He's a playmaker. So what can I do to make this line better? What can I do for my team to win? Well, I need to get in a position to score goals. So I'm going to do that. But that doesn't mean he can't play make. If you watch his game, he uses the give and go exceptionally well. I wouldn't have any issues with him in the middle of the ice. Like I would have, if Leonard goes to the middle of the ice, he's a second line center. Because I don't think he doesn't have the elite playmaking ability, but his playmaking is very good. But if he's on the wing, then that's a guy who can play up onto a top line. So if you have a playmaking centerman, then there's the option there as well. So whether he plays at center or the wing, the Philadelphia Flyers have options, and coaches love that. They love guys who have that level of versatility. And Leonard's the kind of guy who will be very diligent in his details as he continues to develop. So a guy like John Tortorella would like Leonard a lot for his overall game from that respect, and his willingness to be detail oriented.
Yeah, and we saw that this year with Noah Cates. Primarily a winger most of his career, and he saw something, and then Cates was made the.
Well, to be fair, I saw Cates playing center in the USHL level, and it was really good, and the Flyers saw that too.
Okay,
they were there too.
and at number 8, you've seen Oliver Moore, and we talked about him.
Yeah, the worst thing is for 15 years, I would have to follow Shane in this game, and it's hard to add. So I'm going to have to just add what he didn't say because he already said a lot. So what I will add is I went back and looked at a quote from Oliver Moore, and I thought it was really great. He basically says every trip down the ice, it's not that he's not looking to score, but he's looking for the best play. He's looking for the best read, and that's what he's doing. Every time it's a read. So if the read is for him to take the shot, it's for him to take the shot. If the read is for him to make the pass and draw the defense to him, that's what he's going to do. If the read is he's going to have that wicked speed through the neutral zone and then make a play, that's what he's going to do. He looks at the read, and he sees it. What's interesting is I thought about this yesterday, and I do think he's a center. I don't have any bones about that. He's very good on faceoffs. But at Minnesota, if they wanted to create like a crazy great line and they put him and Logan Cooley together, he'll be playing left wing for a year. And they might do that. And there might be times when they do that. But it's at some point he'll start playing center. But Cooley's a better center. He's just older. He's a little better. Doesn't take away from Moore. I love Moore.
Is with Snuggerud too? Is that?
Yeah.
That's a dangerous power play unit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That power play was amazing this year. And now, so you take out Matthew Nyes, you put in Oliver Moore. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, it works out. I have the first defenseman coming off the board, and it's Russian Dmitry Simishev. Let's take a look at the last 4 Stanley Cup winners. And what do they have? Mobile defensemen who can take away time and space, have range, and can make smart first passes because you have no time and space in the playoffs. And he's exactly what, you look at the St. Louis Blues defense core, you look at the Tampa Bay Lightning defense core, you look at the Vegas Golden Knights defense core, he fits in that. And one of the things that sometimes happen, and Dan and I were talking about this before, is when you're in Russia and you're playing against men and you're moving up and down, between KHL, MHL, VHL, and you're moving around as a young player, is once you get to the KHL, you defer a lot. So there's not as much they just don't take advantage of the offensive opportunities that are presented themselves. They defer to their teammates. So he has some untapped upside in terms of offense. I'm not going to say he's going to be a power play quarterback, but what I am saying is that, if he put up 35, 40 points a year in his prime years, 25 to 30, wouldn't surprise me. But that's the kind of defenseman I'd want on my defense core from going into the playoffs.
Wow. And he has not just straight line mobility, he has 4-way mobility as well.
He has good range. He has good range. And he's, that long limbs, long legs, long arms, just gets in the way. It's like trying to get past him is like going through a car wash. You don't want any part of that. Just a pain in the ass for forwards.
Well, Russ?
Yeah. Axel Sandin Pelech is my guy. He's the first defenseman off the board for me. I really got to see a lot of him early in the season at the Five Nations. And was really impressed with him, spoke with him, watched him in the World Juniors. Some things hit me. The first thing that hit me is he makes very few bad reads out there. He's very good at getting into the offensive zone quickly, safely, with the puck, and makes a good play after that. He's not going to be like a big-time goal-scoring defenseman, but he's going to put up a lot of points because he knows how to get in the zone, and when he's on the power play, even though Shane doesn't like to talk about it, he is a catalyst on the power play as far as a passer. He's really good, really adept. But the other thing is he knows how to play defense stick on stick, and he knows how to use the angles. And that's part of the reason why he got into the SHL early, because his defense was good compared to, already aside from his tremendous skating and his offense, the defense is good. And so another thing that was pointed out at the combine, and look, I don't pull many things out of the combine, but I do remember this. I remember my dad a long time ago when I would do, bench press, and he goes, if you could bench press your weight, you're doing pretty good. And there was a time I could do that. Now I could never do it because my weight's way out of control. but I could do that in my prime years. And Sandin Pellikka was actually the strongest guy on the weight bench pound for pound. So, I want you to think about that for a minute, because some people are like, well, he's only 5'11", or well, he's only 175, but he could handle it. He is a strong guy. He's not going to put a tremendous amount of weight on his frame. He's not, but he's already wiry and he has muscle, and that's going to improve. And he's developing the SHL. He's a smart kid. He doesn't have an ego, so I really do like him a lot.
Wow.
So we're at number 9, aren't we?
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
So I had a couple questions. One was, so are we at the point now where, I don't know if you guys sort of have tiers in your minds, but when you go from like 7, 8 and you're talking about, more Dvorsky, and then I guess the answer would be different for both of you, because I think, Shane, we haven't gotten to Dvorsky on your list, right?
No, I have him at number 12.
Okay. So when you're thinking about it in tiers, where do both of your tiers kind of stop close to 7 after the Flyers pick? If you think about it that way.
I would say 12. Probably 12 or 13. Yeah, and honestly, and that's one of the things that people may not realize, the difference between 3 or 4 or 5 spots in the first round is not actually significant. It's not that big of a deal. So if I had some guy at 8 and someone else had him at 12 or 13, I'd be like, okay. Like, it's really, those margins are pretty slim. Even when you get into the second rounds, if there's a difference of 10 spots, you're like, okay. I mean, it's really that it sounds like a lot, but it actually, in reality, the margins are pretty slim there.
I would say it's a 14. I'm really comfortable to 14.
And then in terms of D-men, because, the defenseman that a lot of folks have sort of as the highest guy, and someone who's been talked about as high as maybe even 5 with Canadians. I know the Flyers have been rumored to have some interest, is David Reinbacher, the big Austrian defenseman, who, would be my favorite just because of his combination of size and skill. And I watch a guy like, as Shane talked about what you see in the playoffs now, I look at a guy like a Peter Angelo and I see, okay, maybe Reinbacher could become something like that. I think Russ has got him maybe at 11. I don't know where Shane's got him.
I have him at 10.
Oh, you have him at 10. So,
yeah.
So talk about how big of a difference is there between in your rankings between guys like, Simashev, who's maybe a little better defensively and has a little more size and scope, and then Sandin Pellikka maybe has more offensive upside. Is Reinbacher kind of like a mix of those guys and what you're looking at? And where do you see him?
I personally have him as in terms of his upside. So I look at what is he going to be? Where is he going to play in his core years? Like 24 to 30. So I have him as a number 3 D-man. So he's a linchpin defenseman. Is a guy that is going to go match up against the other team's best lines. He's going to do a large amount of penalty killing. He's going to take a lot of heavy 5-on-5 duty, a lot of defensive zone starts. He makes a smart first pass. There is some upside in terms of offense, and there's some similarities with Simashev in terms of, I don't think he's certainly not going to be on a first unit power play. Maybe he's on a second and getting some points from that respect, but his outlet passes are smart. Like, generally, when you're a defenseman, your first option is your best option. And it's one of the things I noticed with him. His first option, he's very good in that respect. I know perhaps there's other people who think his offensive upside is higher than that, but I certainly don't see it in this draft class. I think this draft class there's a small group of number 3s, and then once we get out of that first round, then there's a bunch of 4s and 5s. But I don't have anybody projecting as a number 2 defenseman or higher. I just don't, not in their prime years. Doesn't mean they're not good, and doesn't mean you're not going to take them, because how hard is it to find a top 3 D-man? So if you're Philadelphia and you're in that hole at 7 and you got like none of the defensemen are gone, okay, now you have an option there because you have that second pick.
Right.
Is you could get another defensive there. And that's where a lot of NHL teams, that's where they do risk mitigation is, Reinbacher and Simashev are more safe. But then, you get into that that second round pick, you're like, okay, what other defensemen are there? If they're really coveting defensemen. So is a Willander there? You know, a defenseman like that. I don't know if Pellica will fall, but he might, you know, from that respect. So, you know, that's where you have to look at those options and for Philadelphia in that respect, because they could end up taking two of like top 4 defensemen in this grouping.
You're talking about for pick 22.
Yeah. Like there's a possibility, like if Willander drops, like there's some teams who like him more, and there's other teams that I've kind of figured out that, you know, are more in the 20 range. And for whatever reason, if there's a run, if he's there, that's another really safe pick because his skating is excellent.
Yeah, even Sandy Pellica said, look, if you're comparing us, his skating's better than mine.
Yeah.
I mean, his skating's great.
It's great. It's actually really impressive. If you get a chance to watch him play the U18 game against the Americans, he drew 3 forwards to one side and took a peek, pivoted, turned around, passed right up to his winger. Winger was up the ice. There was nobody there. Like open opportunity for him. He's that deceptive in that respect. So we're
talking about who now? Just to
Willander.
Okay.
I don't think he'll even be there when the Flyers are picking the second time. I don't.
If it does, that's a player that I would be like banging on the table for. Let's just.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think it would be a no-brainer.
And the only reason I say that is because just commentary, obviously, that Keith Jones said about the importance of defense and how few defensemen they have in their prospect pool and how incredibly important it is to have top 3 defensemen or top 4 defensemen in your core, you know, as young prospect defensemen. Because what happens when you have to go trade for one? Costs you an arm and a leg. What's the acquisition cost? It's ridiculous. What's the price in free agency when you have to get one? Long-term, a lot of money. So if you can avoid that early, particularly for at least 5 years before, you know, they get into, you know, the age 24, 25 range, then you have to get these long-term contracts, and that's something to consider.
Yeah, here's what I would say about what Reinbacher. I don't think the big offense is there either. There'll be some offense. I mean, he has a good shot, but like a lot of guys have a good shot, and just because of the roles they're put in and the time on their ice, and they just don't have a chance to use it a lot. So I don't know how much of a chance he's going to have to use it because he is going to be utilized for his defense, like Shane said. His first pass is great, but he's also really safe. Like he's smart about it, and he's always smart about it. And he is a tremendous defender. He is. The difference between, I think, him and Simashev is not as good defensively, but he's like slippery with the puck offensively. And he can create stuff out there. And that's why I think he will get points based on him creating some more offense. But again, he also at 6'4" has pretty good stride. And that's a guy who can catch up to you with a long reach in a hurry. And so like I have him just behind Reinbacher because Reinbacher is just much better defensively right now, but there's a high ceiling on Simashev that I think none of us really know about because we just don't get to see him enough.
Right. Yeah, we were at number 10, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we got like a little mishmash of players. Obviously, if we've talked about them, we can just kind of let the people know and then kind of move on from there. So, Russ, your number 10 is
Ryan Leonard, and I'll give the one downside to his game because there's not much downside. The one downside is puck security isn't great yet, can definitely be taught. And can he get to the net with the same regularity that he does now when he's in NHL? Those are the only things I worry about. He's still going to be a really good scorer in the NHL, but when I'm rating him against other players, those were things I had to look at least me.
Okay. Shane?
Yeah, interesting. So we're at number 11. This is where I have Matthew Wood, and this is where the power forward aspect of my bias comes in. Even though I have my own system and I put all the data in, I press the button, it spits it out, and shocking that there's going to be a power forward there because he plays in college. He just has an interesting combination of skill and size, and it's such a luxury in the playoffs to have a power forward. And it would be great for him to stay 3 years in college because he already has that freshman year under his belt, just to let him percolate in college hockey before he has to get into the American League. So I have him at number 11.
Okay. Russ?
I have Reinbacher at 11. I said enough about Reinbacher, so it's fine.
You got it. So completing the dirty dozen.
12. That's where I had Dvorsky. So also, like, I think we have made some pretty interesting commentary on Dvorsky as well. So, and this is where, the separation starts to come between, first line players and second line players. Once I got through, like, Leonard was probably the last first line player I had, and everybody else forward after that, I would consider a second line player.
Gotcha.
Yeah, my guy at 12 is Quentin Musty. I think there's a couple things about Quentin Musty. Playing where he plays, I don't think everybody gets to see him all the time. The fact that he was on the U.S. list but played in Sudbury, all of a sudden that gets you on the not being picked for like the Hlinka and other tournaments in the U.S., even though the numbers are there, the performance is there, everything's there, because all of a sudden you're in the Canadian Hockey League, and we don't like to pick too many Canadian Hockey League players. That's just the way it is. So you can't worry about whether he played on a national team lately or not. He could perform. He is a guy that actually, at his size, and he is a power forward as well, at his size can get behind the defense where he is now. Now, I think there'll be a leveling out point for that, but I do think he'll get faster too. I don't compare him to Tage Thompson because I don't think you can compare anybody's trip that Tage Thompson took and say, oh, yeah, he's going to be on a similar path. Yeah, okay, right. He's never going to play center anyhow, so that's another reason. But the shot's great. The hockey IQ is really good. He can be a physical guy when he wants to be. He's not a guy that's going to blow people up, but he knows when to use his size, but he's got a tremendous shot too. And I feel like he's just like, with some, just a little under-mentioned for the kind of talent he has, but I also feel like, I don't know, sometimes these Sudbury guys get forgotten too. Shane knows about Sudbury. Nobody goes there after like early in the season. Like nobody goes there in December. There's a few months of the season people take off from Sudbury.
So we're at number 12, I had Dvorsky. So at number 13, I have Willander, and we spoke quite a bit about him already in that respect. So I won't have to go into a lot of detail, but he's a glue guy as a number 3 defenseman for you. He'll kill penalties. He could be on the second unit power play because of his mobility, and he's gonna be the most frustrating player to scores and playmakers because he just takes away time and space. You just can't get around him because his mobility is so good. So that's my number 13 there.
Gotcha. Russ, you'll get your 13, and Dan, then you go.
Oh, no, I just said it. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Russ. Sorry.
Okay. So 13, I have Colby Barlow. I mean, look, at some point, you got to go with a sniper, and he's just got a tremendous release. Like, there was a shot that he took late in the season, or maybe it was in a tournament, and I was like, man, this release was like NHL release already. He scores goals. Like, he knows how to score goals. He will continue to score goals. He has a lot of strength. I think he's pretty smart on the ice. Does he need to round out his game? Sure. But man, he's got that shot. And at some point you have to respect it.
Gotcha. Dan?
Yeah, no, so I think we might be losing Shane soon. I wanted to ask him about Michkov, because there's some scouts out there that seem to be well connected that they're saying, oh, don't be surprised if he falls a lot longer than people are expecting. And then I've seen like Craig Button, for example, like guaranteeing he's going to go in the top 4 or 5. And so I just wanted to know what your thoughts are on that and how you kind of see the Michkov situation unfolding next week.
What's interesting is really evaluating the teams in the 4, 5, 6 hole. Which ones are more risk averse than the others? So look at Montreal. Would they be willing to take Michkov there? I think they should, but then you also look at roster construction in terms of how many small guys could you possibly have on your top 6. So they would have 3 pretty small players in their top 6. Is there a better option for them there? And they're going to give up skill and some talent for that. The Arizona Coyotes, they're the ones where they shouldn't have any risk whatsoever. They shouldn't care because they're still in rebuilding mode. So just take the Flyer. It doesn't matter if he doesn't come over for 3 years. It's irrelevant. I don't understand that argument. So that's, for me, is silly. And then you get into 7 with Philly. Would Philly have the cojones to go and do that? I think they should. If you're sitting there at 7 and Michkov's on the board, I think you take him. Like, you're in a rebuild. They've been preaching talent. You'll get a defenseman in like the later first round. If Michkov's there, I'd take him because I can guarantee at 8, Washington will take him.
Oh, absolutely. It's not even a question.
Ross Mahoney is going to take him there because they're not afraid to take Russians in that spot.
No.
So for me, there's no way he's getting past 8. Like, I'm at the draft and we're right on the floor. And if he went past 8 and Washington didn't take him, I'd be throwing stuff from my perch at Ross, like on his table. It's just not going to happen. They took Miro Shevchenko last year,
right?
After all his like potential, injuries.
Yes,
and health problems. So
and as a miracle, he came over and he's on the Capitals now.
So not a chance he's getting bad by Washington. But if I'm Arizona, man, I'm taking that and running. Thank you.
Do you think at number 5, if the Canadians have kind of decided they don't want to take him for whatever reason, another undersized forward, do you think that they'll start looking at maybe trading back? And if there's a team that knows the Caps would take him at 8, maybe the Red Wings and Steve Yzerman decide they want to try and trade up to 5 and use some of their draft capital to get Michkov? Is that a possibility?
Certainly, 100%. And it really depends on how, because Detroit's not going to want to move that far down. They're just not. So it would have to be somebody in like where St. Louis is. And, sort of like you got to flip or try to move up a little bit into Montreal, St. Louis to Montreal, Detroit to Montreal. So they don't have to there's not a lot of, you don't want to drop too far.
Yeah. So like Detroit and St. Louis and would be the 2 likely candidates.
Yeah.
With their
they have multiple picks so they can mitigate risk.
Here's what I would say. I think Montreal would take him. I don't think it's a matter of having too many small players because if you look at Michkov as a small player, you're looking at it the wrong way anyhow. And I think that Bobrov, as a guy who has made some big, bold Russian picks before when he's with the Rangers, could put his stamp on this one. And I could see the headlines in the Montreal papers the minute this pick is made that they got the best player in the draft. Like I could see them saying that. They'll say it in French, so we don't know about it for a day, but I could see them saying it.
Well, if you want a new era of orange and you want the Flyer fans excited, I think Michkov would be the play. But
it's a no-brainer. But again, you can't say it's a no-brainer because of the other things, the way the Flyers have been stung, the way that he may not go align with the way they've been picking under this administration, and it's the same people picking. So I unfortunately, I think there's an element of risk that they wouldn't take him. But should they? Yeah. Shane,
you got a hard out at 7. Any final thoughts? And I just thank you so much for taking the time. Busy time of year for you.
No, I appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Philadelphia does because if you track their tendencies coming from Minnesota with Brent Flair and coming into Philadelphia, and then watching the last 4 drafts, like, are they going to be risk averse? And I think they're in a position like where they can't afford that. So if Michkov drops, they should take him. If he's already gone, then there's going to be a really quality player there where you could see a more template player that they would feel really super comfortable, like a Ryan Leonard, that a guy that has that versatility to play wing and center, but also can play a lot throughout different parts of the lineup, different situations, and is a hard-nosed guy that's going to want to play in the playoffs. And the Philadelphia fans will identify with him. And he can keep in college for a couple of years, which I think is really important.
Oh, yeah.
There's no need to rush him through from that standpoint. So, but gentlemen, I got to run off and actually record my part 4 of my draft preview show. But thanks once again for having me on the show. Love the show. You guys are great. And hopefully we get to talk again after the draft.
Absolutely. Shane, thanks so much. Check them out at hpradio.com.
Gentlemen, have a great
night.
Yep.
Bye. Take care. So let me just, we were at number 14, Russ, and we'll continue with your list.
Yeah, and that's where I have Simishev. Really like him. I've seen some Flyers fans say, should we take him at 7? I wouldn't take him at 7 because, like Shane was saying, for the first pick for Briere, there's a lot of risk there. There's a lot to love, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of risk. And I don't think he would take a player with a lot of risk right now. So I think that they would eliminate that.
Right, right. And by the way, that's hockeyprospectradio.com.
Yeah.
And HP Radio is the podcast and also the show that's on SiriusXM NHL. Just want to get the right information there. Yeah, Simashev is like, I just keep thinking of what AV was talking about when Braun was here. Seaweed with that long reach.
Yep.
And he's got the speed that Braun never had. And
he's got good speed.
Tremendous speed.
And he's slippery. Like I said, he's slippery out on the ice, so he will create a lot of offensive chances for his teammates. But again, there's too many safe defensemen to take ahead of him unless all of a sudden, like Dan said, Montreal goes with Reinbacher, and then maybe Sandy Pellica sneaks in there. Then all of a sudden, if they really had their heart set on a defenseman, they'd have to look at it. But I don't think they should have their heart set on a defenseman that badly, because I still feel like anywhere 1 to 7, you can get a top line player. And so you're not getting a top pairing defenseman. Now, the argument is, hey, a number 3 in this league is worth the same as a top line player if he's not a center. And I think that's true. But I also think there's just too many really top-notch forwards to say, why are we taking a risk at all? Like, why should we risk?
Yeah, Dan?
And to me, when I watch these guys, and Russ has undoubtedly watched more film than I have, but I've spent a decent amount of time watching some film. To me, Reinbacher is the main guy who, and it's so hard to project young defensemen, but for me, because of his combination of size, skating ability, I think there is some offensive upside that's probably, first of all, he had a pretty good offensive season, playing in a men's league. And so I think that also when you're talking about a younger player playing in professional leagues, it can mask some of the offensive potential, which I think it sort of did with Dvorsky. But I think it's even more pronounced when you're talking about a defenseman. So
internationally, I didn't think it was great though when he matched up internationally.
That's a fair statement. I guess I don't really want them to go defenseman at 7, but of the defensemen, I would be the least upset if they took Reinbacher because he's a right-handed defenseman. I know Sandy Pellica is too, but I just feel like there's more of a potential of Reinbacher having the offensive ceiling that will make him a top pairing right-handed defenseman. So he would be the guy that I would be least upset with if they took a defenseman at 7. But I still am hoping that they'll shade forward.
Look, I wouldn't take a defenseman at 7 either. We just talk about the options because these are the options out there. I'm not taking a defenseman at 7.
I don't know if it was you or someone else, and I don't know if it was a comment you made to me or that I saw you make somewhere else, that you'd heard that the Flyers had a decent amount of interest in. Well, Leonard, we all know that he's the guy they'd have a lot of interest in. But I thought you'd mentioned Reinbacher too as a guy you'd heard that they'd had interest in. Was that did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I don't know where I got that from. Maybe I heard it at the combine, but it was something. And so I do believe they have interest. I have actually more on some of the guys. I got to go back to my list here because I do have a list of players that the Flyers had interest in, and I'm happy to read it off because it's a pretty good list here. I went and checked around on a lot of Met teams and asked the players. So as an example, when someone says like Sandy Pellica, he spoke to 24 teams, the Flyers probably spoke to him, right? It's 24 teams. So I didn't ask him because there were certain guys I was targeting. Let's see. So like as an example, Jaden Perron, when you get to that 22nd pick, he spoke with the Flyers. That told me something. Maxime Sturback, big, sturdy, shutdown defenseman. He spoke with him. He'd be a good pick at 22, especially if they went forward first, right? So that made sense to me that the Flyers spoke to him. Cam Allen, the Flyers spoke to now, as some would say on Twitter, hey, I got him ranked, 90 or whatever. What's interesting about Cam Allen is many thought that he would be one of the 5 best defensemen in this draft. This past year wasn't great for him after the Hlinka, but he also had a partially dislocated shoulder. So, but again, performed great at the combine strength-wise. That's all I was looking for was strength. He's got long arms for a defenseman. He plays in all situations. I put an article up on him on Full Press Hockey. People could check out. And when he said that, I kind of like modeled some of my game after Ryan McDonough, I really pushed it to him. Because I'm like, this guy's nickname is Mac Truck. Is that really you? Are you really that guy? because, you know, there's not that many Ryan McDonoughs out there that would do what he did with his body pretty recklessly. And he said, yeah, that's why coaches put me everywhere in the lineup. Power play, penalty kill, everything. And so every team needs a versatile defenseman like that, and he can score points. He's done it before. It's just he did it in the Hlinka. He didn't do it as much during the regular season, like compared to the season previously. But I didn't hold it against him. Luca Cagnoni, the Flyers didn't speak to. I asked him that question because I figured they would say no, because he's 5'10", 172, even though he's got a tremendous offensive game and he's feisty. But the Flyers don't want 5'10" defensemen. Like, they just don't. So that basically told me all I needed to know about that. A few players I asked that were smaller, the Flyers didn't talk to. Andrew Strathman, Flyers didn't talk to him. Very talented defenseman, 5'10". Okay, you know, Gavin Brindley, Flyers spoke to. He's another guy who's got a big offensive game. So, you know, he could be around at 22 as well. Played at Michigan as a true freshman.
When you say the Flyers don't want the small defenseman, is that because they've already drafted them in Cam York and Emil Andre? Or I
can't tell you that. Well, Cam York's not a small defenseman. Emil Andre is, though. But these guys didn't draft him. And Brent keeps talking about how he was proud at last year's draft that everybody was between 6 foot and 6'2" or something. To me, that's insignificant. Like, I don't care about that for my entire draft group. I care about the talent. I'm not going to draft everybody that's 5'8". I'm not. But I'm not going to care so much that I would say that's a thing. So when you start talking about that as a thing, I believe it's an organizational thing still at the draft. Now, Briere can override it, but I don't think he would on defense. I don't. So I don't even know if Danny Briere would draft Kimmo Timonen if he had the chance, just as an example, just because of the way this organization is. Even though, like, a guy like Sandy Pellica could be Kimmo Timonen or better.
Timonen's the same height as Cam York.
No, I think York's taller.
York's 5'11", Timonen's 5'10". I mean, I don't know.
And he really wasn't 5'10". If you ever stood next to him, that was a lie. I think he was like my height, like 5'9".
And Danny's 5'8".
That's the only reason I say that, Dan, because, you know, they lie on these things too.
Oh, yeah, they do. I just have never really thought of Cam York as a big defenseman.
No, he's not big. But I don't put small either. Like, I think small defenseman is, you know, once you hit 5'10", 5'10" is small. 5'11", 6 foot. Rachel Dory said something great to me one day on a show, and she was just like, if you're going to be if the difference to you is if you're 5'11" or 6'1", and that's going to make you draft somebody or not, what is the real difference here? And it's true. Now, if it's 5'11" and 6'4" and everything's the same, hey, go with the 6'4" guy.
Speaking of height, I wanted to ask you about a player that I don't think you had in your top 45 that some lists I've seen have as high as 6 or 7 and 10, and that's the big Russian forward Daniil But. Yeah. It looks like he's got this very tantalizing blend of size and skill, and I was just curious your thoughts on him.
I don't have thoughts on him. I didn't get enough good looks that I felt comfortable putting him in the list just because everybody else does. So what I always do is, my rule is I don't do it at all. And I'll be honest, I watch some of these NHL games, and it takes you 10 minutes to figure out who's the good team and who's the bad team. And then it takes you longer to figure out, like, how good's this level? Like, you know, you could say, well, it's the ECHL or in between ECHL and AHL, but some of these teams are really bad. So I didn't get a good read on him. So when I don't have a good read, I just 86 them.
Yeah. Who are some of your favorite targets at 22 for the Flyers?
So Gavin Brindley, he would be my number one. If he's there, from Michigan, super smart. He had legs like tree trunks already. He's super built. Like, if you look on my Instagram page, you'll see this guy is really, like, this is the reason you go to college hockey. You go look at Gavin Brindley. He's the reason, because he's building up his body, and he's playing with elite players like Fantilli and otherwise. And I think Fantilli will be back there with him this year too. So he's a tremendous player. He could score goals. He could play defense. He is a package, but he's smaller. So I think there's a chance he drops. And if he drops, man, I would take him. Perron, a little bit smaller, definitely a smaller frame, tremendous speed, escapability, great shot, great hockey IQ, just a real dynamo in the offensive zone. Really like him. like I said, I would take Cam Allen as a defenseman. See, the problem is, even if the Flyers have decided, hey, we talked to Cam Allen because we're hoping he's there in the third, I don't think he's going to be there in the third. But again, you know how these drafts are. If there's a run of defensemen, all of a sudden Cam Allen's name's going to come up quicker than people thought. I mean, that's just the way it is. If all of a sudden teams are like, hey, we're prioritizing defense, then other guys will fall and other guys will rise. But I do like Sturback. I think he is also a guy that's sort of, I don't know, I guess ignored a little bit, but he convinced me of a little bit in his interview in the sense that if you're a young player and you know what you are, that's a tremendous thing, because you could see guys when they get caught in between, like what's his name? Philippe Myers. He was caught in between. Was he going to be an offensive defenseman? Was he going to be a physical defenseman? And now he's barely a defenseman, right? Sturback knows. He's got the size. He has good skating ability. He plays solid defense. And all of his teammates that I spoke to basically said he saved them so many times on the ice defensively. Because, again, not the greatest team, but played a huge role. So that's another guy who I really like at 22. Let's see who else. Look, if Edward Shala all of a sudden dropped to 22, this guy's got some of the best hands in the draft. And if you want to take your home run swing with him, he scores everywhere he goes. It's just that he's a polarizing guy. He's not the biggest, thickest guy. He's like 6'1", I believe. But the offensive talent's there. Like, you can't deny it. And he has done really well playing against players at his own age group, and he plays against men currently. And I just think he is an underutilized name as far as like in these lists, because people are afraid. They're like, well, we don't know what he is. Yeah, he's 6'2", but he does well internationally. He does, and he's got a great shot because of his hand.
Is there a comparison between him and, actually I can't think of the guy's name. You'll come up with it. The good shooter on the Kings who dropped a little bit because he's got
Kaliev. Arthur Kaliev.
Arthur Kaliev. Is there a comparison between him and Edward Shala?
Well, I think the reason they may be making that comparison is because Kaliev has a great shot.
I just made it on the cuff.
No, I mean, the only thing I would say they have in common is, yes, they have a great shot. I think Sala has better hands, though, where he could actually get through traffic and make plays. Like, Kaliev's a little more one-dimensional. Like, he's a guy that I do think will score more goals than he's scored so far at the NHL level. Shala will score them, but he'll score them in different ways. Sometimes he'll just, fool you. Kaliev, yeah, that part he can't do. Who else is going to be down there? Otto Stenberg's an interesting one because he could play center or wing. He's already physically developed, so he's the high floor guy. But he's got a tremendous shot. He's already got a two-way game, and he's already very strong and can really lean on players in the defensive zone and can really come out with some really good plays in the offensive zone. I've seen him get some nice game-winning goals in big tournaments. He matches up well against big-time players. So Stenberg's another guy who could really be a nice pick down there. Grayson Sawchin, he's a little smaller, but man, has he got good hands and good wheels. And he was with Seattle. Tremendous shot. Smart guy. Like, I know people were sort of down because he was playing like fourth line center in the Mem Cup, but he was like, hey, that's where my coach wanted me. That's where I'm playing. I don't know if that's necessarily meaning he's going to only be a fourth line center now next year. You go look at his offensive numbers, they're really good. But if you watch him play, you'll see how he got those offensive numbers. Hey, he didn't have a great Mem Cup. I'm not going to totally kill him for that. At 22, he'd be worth the swing, though, because there is a lot of offense there. But again, I still would take Brindley above them all. And Shane's right in the sense that where he has Matthew Wood, I have him at 20 because in the end, I still worry about the skating. He's got a great shot. He led his team in scoring at UConn. I spoke to him. He's really smart. He knows everything that he wants to do. The only other problem is he keeps growing, and every time he's growing, it sort of changes how he plays the game. So I do kind of wonder when all that rubber hits the road, is he even going to be a center? Because he didn't play center last year. He's hoping to play, he told me, next year. But if he all of a sudden goes through 2 or 3 years of college and doesn't play center, well, then he's a big left winger with a great shot. Then I think that does affect his value.
How about Andrew Christo or Cristal? However,
he's an interesting one. He's a guy that has a lot of offensive ability. He doesn't play a ton of defense, but like Shane said, could he play average offense? Yeah, I think he could. He could be there. I don't think he'll be there. I think the problem with the Flyers have that pick at 22 is where teams have a second swing at players, like Chicago at 19 and whatever. I think, I don't think Cristal gets past them. And he's also friends with Connor Bedard. So right. I think that's another factor. Like maybe they take him for, I've seen teams do this. Hey, give him a best friend on the team. He already knows them and they have chemistry. Maybe there's even something there at the NHL level too. So I don't think he would get past Chicago, to be honest.
And they did well with smaller players like Pat Kane and of course Alex DeBrincat. So they're not afraid of that. So it's really going to be fascinating that if the Flyers can get back or are going to make a move to maybe even get another pick. And I would imagine it can't really be much higher than 22 if it's higher at all. But there's a lot of talk about Scott Lawton.
You don't want to move out of the top 10 at all costs. You do not want to do that.
No. I'm talking about trading an NHL player. Like we hear a lot of
for a player.
A player, right? To get in.
Like if they, for example, if they decide they want to trade Travis Konechny, I'm guessing that they could get a pick in the teens for Travis Konechny.
I don't think so.
Really? You don't think so?
Not in this draft. Next year's draft, yes. Not in this draft.
I don't know. I feel like Detroit's already at 9. You offer them Konechny at 17. Maybe there'd be some interest, but maybe you're right.
I just feel like a team in the late 20s would definitely give you that first this year. But again, they have to be a team that could handle his salary too, because teams are tight to the cap. And so, that's another element where it makes it a little tougher. If his salary were $3 million, yeah, I'd probably say so. Like if Travis Konechny, if Scott Lawton had the offensive talent of Travis Konechny, then I think you're talking, because the money's right and the salary's right. But I don't think the other two sort of match up. That's just me. And now that we're really close to this draft, even them getting that second round pick is going to be hard. If you noticed lately, the trades they're making, they're still getting seconds for next year. They still haven't been able to get that second for this year. There's a reason for that.
Right.
Because those high seconds are gold in this draft. And teams are going to be very reluctant if they're in that first, 6, 7, 8 picks of that second round to trade one of them. Very reluctant.
That was the pick we traded away for. Was that the Ristolainen trade?
Yeah. And unfortunately, Flyers fans are going to look at that pick for a long time. I mean, I could give you my best story is the Flyers once upon a time traded for Steve Eminger.
Right.
And they traded a pick, and I was at the draft. There's no Twitter. And I looked at the people around me and I said, you realize this pick now could be John Carlson, or it could be Markstrom. I said, they need both, but it's going to be one or the other. And it was John Carlson.
Right.
And that's because the Flyers wanted size. And so they got Steve Eminger. If they'd signed him to be a scout, fine.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And
that's when they took Spiza, right? They'd already taken. Is that the same draft?
Oh, Lucas Spiza, yeah.
So they figured they already had somebody, and they wanted somebody now. But
yeah. And so, I just remember saying that at the draft, like, hey, that could be Carlson. Dan, you could track this one. This is going to be probably a good player.
Yeah, it's going to pick number 39. I mean, Chuck Fletcher was just trading away second-round picks like they were candy. I mean,
that's the weird thing about that. The weird thing about that, which made no sense to me, was they had this bravado that this was a great draft. They knew it was a great draft. They were going to load up on it, and then they got rid of everything in the second round. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I very, very goofy. The funny thing is a lot of us were kind of upset that they didn't get the Florida first round pick for this year. They got it for next season. And
Yeah, I was upset at that. I was like,
yeah, oh yeah, no, I think we were all probably upset about it because the pick wasn't available, right? Because they traded it away for the big defenseman from Montreal. I forget his name, but but that pick, which would have been in the teens if Florida wouldn't have made the conference finals, turned into pick 31. So maybe with all these injuries that Florida had in the playoffs, maybe next year that pick is, in the teens as opposed to 31 this year.
Maybe.
Yeah. And, Pierre is aware of this. He's on Ray and Dregs, the podcast, and he was referring to some of the moves that they were making in the run up to him taking over as patchwork. And there was a little bit too much patchwork. So, I mean, to me, that gives me a sense that he's very aware.
It seems like, at a minimum, they might move Scott Lawton at the draft and get a late first round pick, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, he would be a guy that I could see it because someone could use him at center and he's a low salary. So, but again, like, I don't know. It's good to get picks for players. They're going to need some players too, though. Because you can't just go with the theory that, hey, we're going to get all our picks right, because they're not. No team does. And so at some point, you've got to be able to trade for some prospects too.
Yeah, well,
it's got to be a mix of that.
Helge Grans move was decent, right?
It was decent. I mean, I think he could be a 4. I just don't think there's much offense there. But as far as a puck mover, good skater, decent defenseman, sure. I looked at his shot chart. It's abysmal. Like, it's just, he's shooting them from the wrong places. He's missing the net. But those other parts of his game are pretty good. I think the Kings just said, hey, like, we don't need him because we're good at defense. That's our one thing that we're really good at.
On the right side.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get it. I mean, there's some value there.
So Adder's still ahead of him, would you say? Or
I think he is. Someone asked me the other day. I think he is, even though his speed isn't, because that's the last bastion for Adder. He gets that speed up like half a notch, and every part of his game is better than Grans at that point. Like, because he's an offensive guy, he's got a really good shot, he's got to play on the power play, he's physical. So I think that's really the last bastion for him. Where Grans, if he's going to be offensive, has to get more confidence in the offensive zone and start hitting the net more, and also start getting used more in a defensive situation. If you looked at like the chart, I want to say it was like 53% or something was low that he was used in defensive situations. So,
okay. Well,
that's where, if this organization is so bereft of prospects on the right-hand side on defense,
yes,
which is where I would not be that upset if, we ended up taking Reinbacher at 7, just because and I know you don't want to draft for need. I also think he could be a very good NHL player.
Oh no, listen, I mean, I would not be the happiest as far as, is that the best guy for them to take? No, I don't think it is. Also, I think Sandy Pellick is better, and he serves the same purpose as far as the shot. I just think then you're passing up a guy who could potentially be really super on offense for the guy who's more physical. And I think that's the divergence in this organization anyhow. What do you want? You want offense? You want speed and offense? Or do you want really good defense and physical? Like, that's the difference of like the Holmgren era and maybe what they're going through now. But that's where they have to sort of decide as an organization, what do we want to be?
Well, I think the other thing is, and if they say we're going to build this the right way, and from the footers, or okay, they're not going to do a tear down to the studs, but they have next year's draft. They have time. They bought themselves time.
They did.
Take that time and have a plan. Just take the best player, and when you need a defenseman, you'll get a defenseman. Now, I heard you say earlier today when you're fine locked on podcast, you don't want to hear about the 2024 draft. And I understand. Right. But prospectively, there are some defensemen there. I'm not going to name or get anybody.
Sure, right. But don't tell me now today it's the best defensive draft in a long time, because, things change so much.
At least as good as what they have now, but the forwards next year probably won't be. And
for them, it could be. Like, they could be in the Celebrini. Yeah, they could get Celebrini. Like, they were. No, of course, it could be.
I mean, if the Flyers trade away Lawton and Konechny and something happens with Carter Hart, like, I mean, they clearly could be one of the worst few teams in the league.
Oh no, I think they're on track for that anyhow.
Let's say that let's say that you take a forward this year because even though you like Reinbacher because you think you're going to get a defenseman next year, and then you get one or two next year, and
then you take a Celebrini,
change, but Celebrini or Cole Eiserman or something like that. So
either one. I love them both, and I would definitely take Celebrini over him because just the offense is just so good. But again, you could be in that spot. So I think that's why, if it's me, I'm taking a forward at 7 because that's the strength of where that draft is. And then I will get my defenseman at 22. But if there's not a good defenseman there, then I'm going to go with Brindley or Perron, and that's fine. Those are the other guys I have in my back pocket there. And that's where I have to see how the draft goes.
Right.
I do.
And you think
I'm not looking into this draft.
Cam Allen would be like a candidate if at 22. He would
Absolutely.
be one of the guys.
I think so. They spoke to him. I don't know if they spoke to him for the third round. I just don't think he'll be there in the third round. I think there'll be a run on defenseman and he won't be there. But I just can't walk into that draft where the offensive picks are so good and decide we need that defenseman because we need a lot. If I'm thinking about it, I'm on that team and I'm saying I'm in the organization now. That's why I said we. I'd be like, we need a lot. So let's go with the strength of the draft. The strength of the draft is not defense, even if you get the first guy off the board. It's like the NFL draft. Just because you get the first center off the board, where does he fall in the lexicon of the draft? If you took the best center but left the third best wide receiver on the board, for another team to take, you probably made a mistake in an offensive league. Well, the Flyers need offense too. So if you can get a center in that spot, they need centers. I think we all know that.
Well, that's that and their top D or their top organizational weakness. No doubt about that.
And maybe Gauthier is a center, maybe he isn't. Right now, you'll find that out because he'll get in the league. He'll be there when Torts is there. And I will be shocked if Torts starts him at center. Shocked. Not because Cutter can't do it, but because John will have enough confidence that he can do it. There's a difference there. So I still have to double down against that and say, and even if I'm at the table, I have to ask the question, what if Cutter can't play center? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we take a center here? That would be my argument at the table.
I just so.
And I'm assuming Mitchkov's taken because if Mitchkov isn't taken, then I'm taking him because I can't pass up a guy that might score 90 points. Like Shane's right. But if it's the other way, I'm like, I can't pass up a guy who maybe is a top line center. How could I do that?
I'm just mentally preparing myself for either Mitchkov or Benson to be available and them not taking that player.
I know you should mentally. It's good. I tell all Flyers fans mentally prepare for that because, And I asked. Here's the thing, though. I will give the Flyers credit. I know that Brent said that he can't deny some of the offensive ability from some of the smaller players, so you can't ignore that. So, of course, I asked Benson to speak to the Flyers, and they did. Still doesn't mean they'll take him, but at least they did their due diligence and spoke to him. Because I'm telling you, if you speak to Zach Benson, you will be sold in 5 minutes.
Yeah, can he make soft pretzels too, or is it just the donuts?
No, it's just mini donuts.
Just mini donuts.
He said they didn't trust him on any other station for the entire business, but mini donuts was his thing. He was good at that. And he's not making them this year. He's done with it.
Well, I mean, I think it would have been pretty irresponsible of them not to talk to him.
Right.
So, I mean.
That's why I asked the question, because I wanted to know.
Right. So, obviously, if he's available, he would be a great guy to take. I just have my concerns that with taking – and I've seen on a lot of mock drafts, people have him sliding, because of the size, which I wouldn't be surprised at.
I mean, again, I'll just go back to – I just wrote about it. Like EP is going to put out something. Your greatest draft successes, your greatest draft failures. And up on my site, I still have like the 2016 rankings that I did. And I had DeBrincat like 20th. And of course, he slid. I don't know. I think I was kind of right where I had him because he's pretty damn good. But I had people telling me he's not going to play in the NHL.
Probably should have had him. I don't know if it's higher or lower, but just joking.
Probably even higher. Yeah.
Right.
But I was like, my big thing with him was he has dominated every level he was at ever. So he dominated in high school. He was dominating with the program. Like, what else do I need to see? And he dominated at the NHL as far as being a goal scorer. So, yeah, he was able to do it. Benson has done the same thing. Now, he's not the goal scorer that DeBrincat is, but he's actually a better all-around player because he could really rack up assists. But he could really do great things on your offense, and he has deception and all that. Now, if you're putting up Benson or Michkov, and they have the guts to take Michkov, I'm not going to kill you. But if it's Benson and Reinbacher, I would take Benson. I just would. Because again, like, you know, it's funny. It's like, how did they ever draft Claude Giroux? I was at that draft in Vancouver, and what's his name? Bobby.
Yes, it's the Italian kid.
Yes, I rode the plane with him. From New Jersey to Vancouver. He was on my flight. And the Rangers drafted him and the Flyers wanted him. And that was what the holdup in Bobby Clark's head was, because he knew that the Flyers wanted him. And yet they drafted Claude Giroux.
Sanguinetti.
That's it.
Yeah, he was a New Jersey kid. And I think Torts damaged Sanguinetti. I do. He wasn't nice to him. Now, maybe Torts was right, and maybe he couldn't play the way he wanted him to, but he just, I don't think he treated him well when he was with the Rangers. But either way, they still had the guts to take Claude Giroux.
Yeah.
Would they take Claude Giroux in this draft? I don't know, because they passed on Caulfield, who, you know.
Twice.
Yeah, twice. So.
How are they going to take Benson? But here's a funny stat. Now you sent me down the Giroux wormhole. The year that the Flyers took Giroux 22nd, 3 defensemen went in the spots right before Giroux. Mark Matera to the Ducks, David Fisher to the Canadiens, and Sanguinetti to the Rangers. Those 3 players have combined for a total of 6 points in the NHL. Giroux has 1,000. It's kind of funny.
It is, and I was just, you know, and I remember like when Clark was like saying the wrong name. I asked somebody, because I was on the concourse. I was actually interviewing somebody, and I was like, did he just say that? And someone said, yeah. And it was like a big deal, you know. But look, I mean, that's the best draft pick they made in the last 20 years. And he was a smaller guy.
Yep. A lot of people are drawing parallels between the 2 players, fair or unfair. But what was it? By 2009, he was a player.
Yeah, I covered him when he was with the Phantoms, like when he got the call up to the Phantoms, and I saw how good he was, and he had the cockiness and the confidence. Benson has that too. I don't say they're similar players. I don't, because I think they go about their business differently.
Right.
But in the end, measurables are pretty close, pretty on point, and point levels are pretty close. And I would just say, with this group of Flyers drafting the guys at the table, would they take Claude Giroux at 22? Maybe at 22. Would they take him at 7 is really the better question, because that's where the thing's going to come up. I think at 22 they might, because Perron and Brindley are similar sized. But, you know, would they take him at 7? Because obviously in that draft, you know, now you would jump at Claude Giroux in the top 10. Knowing what you know.
Oh, so sure. He's second in points for the entire draft. Only Nicholas Backstrom has more points, and he played with Ovechkin. So
I mean, you know, it just goes to show you the risk in it, but also goes to show you that you have to have the guts too.
Well, I mean, if Daniel Briere, who's probably in real life is probably about 5'6", if he is your GM, and then to me it's like, he had to play against a lot of big players, and he knows what it's like to go into the traffic areas.
I know everybody says that. It doesn't mean that's what he's going to do, though.
I know. That's a fascinating subplot here, but we got to draw things to a close. Right? Just a fantastic show. What's your gut feeling on who you think is going to be there and who they're going to take?
Well, now that Shane's off the show, because we're going head to head on Sirius, I think Leonard.
Okay. Yeah, it's my gut.
You think he's going to be there? I've heard a lot of noise with Leonard to the Canadiens, but
I just think it's noise.
Okay.
I think he'll be there.
And you think they'd take him over Benson if they're both there?
Yep.
Yeah. What about
they're gonna go for the more physical guy. The one quote that I love about Leonard is he takes puck battles personally. He told me that.
What if? So let me ask you this. Let's say the draft goes Bedard, Fantilli, Carlson, Michkov, Smith, Leonard. Okay. Now you're the Flyers, and Dvorsky's available, Moore is available, Reinbacher's available.
Right.
Which of those three guys, or you think it's someone else?
So,
and Benson's also available, but
no, that's fine because I had 3 unlocked on. If people want to go back to it, I put up 3 scenarios that I think can happen, and this is one of them. So, am I drafting as me, Russ Cohen, or am I drafting as the Flyers?
No, who do you think the Flyers? I know you're taking probably Benson. Who maybe? Who?
No, I would.
Who do you think the Flyers are taking?
Oliver Moore.
You think they'd take more over Dvorsky, and Reinbacher?
Yep.
Is that based on the intel you've gleaned, or just
no intel? No intel. Gut feeling that he's a center. Check. He was with the program, so they obviously do lean towards that. The Flyers have leaned towards that. Brent has leaned towards that. Check. Going to college, easy to keep an eye on him. In Minnesota, that's a happenstance, but it's Minnesota. Another check. I think it would be too much for them to pass on, knowing that, hey, he's a center, and he's a second-line center at worst.
And he has game-breaking speed.
Yeah. Oh no, he's the fastest guy in the draft. One scout unnamed said elite skater, and he is. And they don't have an elite skater in the organization.
You think I've got one more? Do you think that if Michkov is available when they're picking and they've decided that they don't want to take him, you think that they might, everyone knowing that the Caps are going to take him at 8, you think that they might end up trading back a few spots so that someone can give them a bunch of capital to move ahead of the Capitals to take Michkov?
I don't think so because there won't be a lot of time, and the Capitals, if you ask the Capitals, they probably don't believe the Flyers would take him. So now if you're the Flyers, you're trying to find a team to leapfrog the Capitals just to take him. That's hard to do in 3 minutes or 5 minutes.
I don't know. He starts slipping. You've got a GM like Yzerman who's sitting there at 9 and knows that the Caps are going to take Michkov.
Yzerman's cheap by nature. He's not giving you a lot.
He's
not
not
as much as you think.
You
know that. He's maybe the worst guy to trade with of anybody.
Yeah, so we're not getting their first-round pick and Simon Edmondson.
Right. No, you're not.
But it's an interesting one. If he's available there, man, I really hope they take him. But
I hope they take him too. I'm going to be on the draft floor because I'll be around with the Sirius crew and I have access. So when that pick is up, I'll be on the draft floor, intently watching, and I want to see what's going on the table. If Michkov is there, it's the same thing that happened last year with Shane Wright. I watched Shane Wright slipping. The Devils were right next to me, and so were the Kraken. And I watched those 2 teams, and they were having some heavy discussions, man. heavy discussions. And as it turned out, it was an easier thing for the Kraken to take Wright because they were like, yeah, I mean, he's at number 4. We're going to take him. Where the Devils had to make the tougher decision of not taking him. And that's the position the Flyers will be in.
Yeah.
Right. And it's
what's going to be said if we don't take him?
Yeah. I think there'd be a terrible mistake, but
hey, what do you know? You're just a guy,
Hey, I'm just a guy. I'm just a 50-plus year fan. I'm an old guy.
You're not as old as me, but that's okay.
No, I am. I'm 63.
Oh, you are older. Good for you. Dan's the young guy here.
Yeah.
Yes. He's a junior partner.
You don't feel
it. I got slashed on yesterday in my roller hockey game, and now our listeners don't give a crap about any of this. But in my roller hockey game yesterday, I took a slap shot off of I turned around because I was trying to get out of the way, and I took a slap shot off my calf where there was no protection at all. And then later in the game, the same guy who I took the shot from whacked me in the other ankle. So I've got like huge welts on both of my ankles. It's awesome.
I don't miss that, man. I don't. That's why I play softball.
Yeah.
A lot safer.
Yeah, I played street hockey. I hadn't played street hockey since 1980. I tore up my knee, and that was the end of that. But I had a good career while I was at it. So,
There you go.
yeah. So, Russ, let me see. You're at sportsology.com. Locked On Flyers. Okay, the podcast.
Yep.
Off the Post Radio, of course. You have a show this week?
Yeah. Off the Post, we will have. Well, we ran one on Wednesday. I think the next one will be on like Tuesday probably with Shane. We just did one with Chris Peters, so people could listen to that. That's really good.
Yeah, excellent.
Flow
And of course,
hockey.
this Friday, you're doing a mock on
We're doing a mock
SiriusXM
live
at noon.
at noon, high noon. It's going to be like, I don't know, Rocky themed, and clearly Shane is Apollo Creed and I'm Rocky, but that's okay. And we're going to do like the top 15 picks for the hour of Mick Kern's show. So SiriusXM 91, 12 o'clock.
And don't forget, if you have the Sirius app, you can join it in progress and
Yes.
restart the show so you can catch the whole
Yes.
thing. You
Yeah.
need, oh, wow, it's too late. No, none of that. If you have the app, and if you're a subscriber, 99 out of 100 people do, you should be in good shape.
And if you know Shane and I, after the third pick, there'll start to be differences, and then, insults will fly, and who knows what.
Absolutely. Russ, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody's had a good time listening tonight.
I had a good time too. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks, Russ.
You take care. So, Dan, I don't think we're really going to get into some of the things that have gone down with like Flyers adding Leclerc and Sharp and Valerie Camillo.
Yeah, we can do another show and cover all that stuff.
Do another show, cover all that. Like, 'cause this is a time of year where people, that stuff is important, but it's not as important as the draft, free agency, and the aftermath of all that. And we're expecting some big trades. So we're going to be back with you. The draft is 9 days away. I'm not sure if we're going to be before or after the draft. We'll definitely have a show after the draft, obviously, to recap. We might be hitting you in between with some other information that may pop up. There might be a trade. You don't know. Dan, what's your final thoughts for tonight?
My final thoughts. I'm just, like I said, I tweeted out, I'm just getting anxious about the draft. I mean, it's just such an important pick for the Flyers, right? At number 7, or if they trade, whatever they do. And also some of the other noise about, they got to try and find a suitor for Kevin Hayes. Scott Lawton's now popped up in rumors. What's going to happen with Carter Hart, Konechny, D'Angelo? It's just such a pivotal time for the Flyers. And a lot of it is going to be focused on the draft, not just the picks they make, but the moves that they make. And it's stressful as a fan because we just want them to make the moves that are going to turn out to be the right moves, but we don't know what they are. So it's it's a little bit stressful. The thing that makes me sleep easier at night is that they are going to get a very good player in the draft. So, we might be upset if they take a David Reinbacher or someone instead of a Zach Benson, but the reality is that whoever they take is going to become either a first or second pair defenseman or a top, 2-line player. So. Yeah.
I say Benson, Dvorsky, Leonard, Moore. I'm okay with Reinbacher. It's not a bad player. You're not getting a bad player. It can't whiff. It can't be a Rubtsov. It can't be that. Other than that, it should be okay.
Yeah. I mean, Rubtsov was taken in the late teens or 20s or whatever it was. I mean, we're going to get a very good player.
Yeah, it's a better draft.
Barring something, very strange from happening. I mean, even Flyers fans would be like, well, he's like Nolan Patrick, number 2. Well, if Nolan Patrick was in this draft, he probably would go closer to 10. I mean, and he obviously had a lot of injury issues, but this is a very good top 10 in this draft. And there's very low risk of the guy that they take not being an impact NHLer.
Yeah, let me leave you with this thing. If people catch you at dsilver88 on Twitter, you can catch me at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520 on Twitter. And of course, catch it at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on Twitter, and at O&B Puckcast on Getter. But let's leave this. Cutter Gauthier for some reason in some parallel universe is now entered into this draft. I think he holds his value pretty well. You know,
well, that's revisionist history. I mean, if you want to look at what Cutter Gauthier going into this, if Cutter Gauthier was going into last year's draft,
right,
the same way that he would be going into this year's draft, he would be a guy in the 10 to 20 range. You can't, I don't know if you're doing this, you can't look at what Cutter Gauthier did this past season.
No. I'm just saying, you know what it is? You know what feeds into that? I have heard so much nitpicking of some of these players that we have to have perspective of what you're saying is that Cutter Gauthier would be like after that, maybe the top 12. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you have Slavkovsky, who went first last year, probably would be about 6 or 7 this year. So, right. You know, we're going to get a player at 7 who could have challenged to be taken number 1 last year.
Right. That's the point. That's the point I guess I'm trying to pull across. You know, it's just, and at 22, don't take Jay O'Brien or anything funky like that. There's too many good players.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Until next time, everybody, we're going to wrap it up right there. So take care.